What is up, Baseball Nation? Welcome to Fan Interference, a Major League Baseball podcast where we discuss the latest news and storylines from around the league. My name is Joey, and I will be your host today. You can find me on Twitter at Major League Joey, and soon you might even find some YouTube content under the same name. This podcast was recorded on August 18th, 2021. First and foremost, I want to welcome you to the podcast. This is the first episode, and I'm ecstatic to be able to share with you my ideas on some of the hot-button topics facing the sport of baseball. Today, I will be taking a closer look at Major League Baseball bullpens. Is there even more room for their modernization? Is the closer an antiquated idea? Could we possibly reimagine what it means for a reliever to save the game? That is coming up next on Fan Interference. Reimagining bullpens. Reimagining closers. What does it even mean to save a game, and what sort of utility do we get from bringing our best reliever into the game exclusively in the ninth inning? What do we lose by doing that? That's today's discussion. Now, this is something that I've thought about a lot, and, well, if I had to start the conversation somewhere, I think we need to start on equal footing. I think we need to agree that the modern game of baseball is very different than the way the game used to be played only 30 plus years ago. The game's been changing rapidly, and it seems to be changing even faster than ever before. You don't have to look any further than some of the newest rule changes that have come onto the books to see evidence that the modern game is vastly different than what we used to see when we viewed the game under the historical lens. So, in what way is the modern game different? This is a question that I've asked myself, and there's something in particular that seems to be glaringly obvious, and that's that the modern game prioritizes efficiency and effectiveness over what we understand as that romanticized historical view of the game. The clearest example of this is, of course, the defensive shift. The original positions that were outlined for the game of baseball sort of were created under this illusion, this fake pretense, this falsity, that there's a random distribution under a spray chart for a batter. That no matter who is batting, there's an equal likelihood that they will put the ball into left field as they will hit it towards where the second base position is. There's an equal chance that the ball will get hit to a shortstop as it'll be a fly ball to center field. Now, the problem with this view is that it's simply not true. Spray charts are, in fact, not a random distribution. There's a ton of biasy when you look at a spray chart. There's biasy when you look at it on an individual batter's level. Never mind when you look at it just for all batters in conjunction. Most batters are right-handed. Most batters tend to pull the ball. Why would we have our positions set up such that it's the best defense to account for a random distribution of hits across the field? Doesn't really make sense, does it? Well, no, it doesn't. And that's why the modern game has invented the shift, a means to exploit that incongruency in the distribution of hits across the field. And it works. It works well. You just have to look at the Tampa Bay Rays or the New York Yankees or any of these other teams that utilize the shift to great effect. It's efficient. It's effective. It is objectively better than the romanticized historical view of what a defensive alignment should look like. Is it as much fun? Well, I'll leave that up to you for every viewer to decide for themselves. But is it more efficient? Is it more effective? Well, that's an argument I don't think we can really have. So if we can agree that the modern game is moving in a direction towards efficiency and effectiveness, even if it's at the expense of our historical understanding of the game, why don't we take a look at what the bullpen is and consider how that might be an area for further progression as it modernizes with the game in the same way that maybe the shift has done so. So what does the average MLB bullpen look like? Well, the best pitcher is called the closer, and he's reserved for save situations. The second and third best pitchers in your bullpen are typically considered your setup men. They pitch the 8th and 7th innings. Pitchers 4 through 6, maybe up to 7 now that rosters have been expanded recently, are your middle relievers, and they come with various skill sets. Some are known for being high velocity guys. Some guys pitch east to west. Historically, we've even seen lefty specialists fall into this area, although, as many of you probably would note, the new rule change with relievers means pitchers generally must face 3 batters. So lefty specialists are a bit rarer to come by, but they still exist. And they would fall into that category of pitchers 4 through 6 or 7. And your final pitcher, well, that's your long reliever. Typically, that's a reliever who can give you a little bit more innings than you could get from another pitcher, or perhaps it's a glorified AAA starter who maybe at some time down the line you expect them to be part of the rotation, but for now they're a little underdeveloped, so they've taken on this role of being the mop-up long reliever who comes into a game to give you 3+ innings in any given appearance. That's what the average Major League Baseball bullpen looks like. And realistically, with the exception of maybe an argument here and there about how many pitchers fall into which categories, a bullpen's pretty much always looked that way. So the bullpen itself hasn't changed that much. Clearly, the pitchers within the bullpen, their stuff has changed. Velocity is up, movement is up. Definitely, when we look at the actual quality of the pitchers in a bullpen, that has changed over time, but the actual construction of a Major League Baseball bullpen is not that different than it used to be. So then let's consider how the average bullpen actually operates. Well, if you look at last year, if you look at the data from 2020, on average, a starter gave you less than 5 innings of work. Let that sink in. They gave you less than 5 innings of work. If you haven't ever seen a chart for this, it's actually remarkable. Starters have been going less and less every year, and markedly so. And I don't see any sign of it slowing down. The bullpen is going to change massively as time goes on. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that starters just can't go as far into games as they used to. This means, from now on, I don't care what year it is, you can always expect your bullpen, on average, is going to have to deliver 4+ innings of work per game. Relievers have a lot to handle. Lots of arm fatigue, lots of shoulder fatigue. The depth of your bullpen is going to be important. The depth of your bullpen on an organizational level, on the AAA, AA, and even going down to high A ball levels, is going to be very important. And the average bullpen operates under the following assumption. It always has, and I believe there's a chance it might not always do it in the future. And that is that the closer is reserved for pitching the 9th inning. Why? Well, because we've got this stat, this concept known as a save. And I'm going to argue that the save is not nearly as important a concept as we currently understand it to be. A save, if you're unaware, is of course when your team is winning at the tail end of a game by 3, 2, or 1 runs, and your pitcher comes in and closes the door on the game, prevents the other team from scoring enough runs to tie up or win the game, and they're awarded this stat, a save. It's a marking that lets you know this is our best reliever. This is the reliever who comes into the game when the moment is the most significant, and they close the door. When the fans are standing on their feet, cheering as loud as can be, this is the guy we want on the mound. Conversely, when it's a scary moment and the crowd is as quiet as can be, and we need someone with the composure and the skill set to close the game, this is the man for the job, the closer. He's going to come in and get that save. Well, much like a win, is a save totally in the control of the pitcher? Well, for a win, it's clearly not in the control of a starting pitcher or even a reliever. A win is a function of your pitching, of course, but also your offense and your defense. Remember, if you pitch a perfect game, you can't win if your team doesn't score a run. In fact, with the new rule change of the ghost runner on second base, with a pass ball or two, you could throw a perfect game and lose. A win is by no means exclusively a function of how well you pitch. Yet it's a statistic that we assign and give exclusively to pitchers. A win is also a function of your defense. You ever seen somebody make an error that was critically important? A run scores? Maybe a bunt was laid down late in the game, the pitcher picks it up, throws it to first. Phew, sails into right field. A run comes around to score, and now you've got 1, maybe 2 people in scoring position. Defense plays a role. So we understand from the modern perspective that a win is not that critically important of a statistic. We like to look at expected statistics, not statistics that reflect what occurred in the past, like a win, but statistics that let us know what we could expect from the pitcher. We call these sabermetrics. Well, a save is no different than a win. Just like a win, a save is a function of how your offense performed. A save can't happen if you're constantly getting errors on every single play. You need good defense. And I would even argue a save is a function of what relievers were used in the preceding games. If a team uses a particular set of relievers 3 games in a row, well, the manager can't go back to those same relievers. They're going to have arm fatigue and shoulder fatigue. That manager will need to expand who they're willing to put into the game, who they trust to cover a game. So if we can get that premise out there, and I think I can get reasonably most people to agree that a save is not just in the domain of the pitcher, but is a function of many different things, including several that are outside of the control of the pitcher himself. Why don't we reimagine what a save is? Well, let's think. If a starting pitcher gives you less than 5 innings, let's say they give you 4 2/3, at that point, a reliever has to come into the game. Well, let's assume a scenario where the Yankees are playing the Red Sox. It's now the 5th inning. The game is 3-3. At this point, under the conventional logic, well, managers would put out maybe their 4th best reliever, their 3rd best reliever. They put somebody out there that they have some trust in. We're not going to put the person out there who is going to mop up games, but we're certainly not going to put out our best pitcher. I mean, in this scenario, you would never see Aroldis Chapman go out there to pitch this fifth inning. Now, the game's tied. If you were to look at those, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but there's some times where you can expect what are the percent likelihood that a particular team will win given a certain set of conditions. There are these websites that are out there that try to use advanced metrics to understand, well, this team has a 55% chance of winning, and this batter got out. Not 55% chance of winning anymore. It dropped down to a 53. These things exist. Well, in a close game like that, any change in the score has a significant impact on the percent likelihood of winning. In fact, that's the point in time where the game has the most volatility. A tie game in the fifth inning is actually potentially the most critically important moment in the game. If the Yankees were to theoretically throw Aroldis Chapman out there for the fifth inning and he closes it down and strikes out two batters and gets a fly ball out for the third. Now, if it's a home game at Yankee Stadium, it's the bottom of the fifth. And well, the game is in their hands now. They have 3 extra outs. Conversely, if the Yankees try to throw out a reliever who's maybe a little bit lower in the bullpen, there's a chance that they can give up a run. Even if it's just a solo home run, that has a huge impact on the likely winner of the game. So what if we reimagined what we view as a save to not necessarily be to ensure that your team maintains the lead they already have, but rather to prevent a game from getting out of hand? You see, if the objective is to win as many games as possible, in my worldview, it's better to do things that give you a better chance to convert a close game into a win. I think that's a better use of your time, energy, and resources than to throw your best pitcher out there to ensure that the games you already have a lead in, you win. If you look at even the worst of closers, their conversion rates on a save are pretty good. You aren't getting closers out there that are having half as many blown saves as they have saves. The conversion rate for a save is, pretty high. Wouldn't it be better to take those strong pitching performances and put it more towards the middle of the game to extend the duration of the game before your bullpen would be likely to give up runs to the opposition? Part of what I'm saying actually is based upon the idea that I think a lineup does better when the people around them are also doing better. So if you have a game that's tied in the fifth inning and your offense has been cold all game, if you throw that closer out there for the fifth inning and then your setup man for the sixth inning, maybe in those 2 innings when your team is batting, you get a single. And that sparks the rest of your offense. And all of a sudden, you score 2 runs. You score 3 runs. Maybe by the end of the game, you'll be in what we consider a traditional save situation. But also, maybe, in a game where you would not have been in a traditional save situation, you could eke out a win. Because you didn't let the game get out of hand earlier on. You see, a save assumes your team was already in a winning position. And yes, if you're a good team, you can reasonably expect that you're going to be in a lot of situations where your team is reasonably going to win. But that's not true for every team. And it's also not true that teams don't go on streaks where they win a lot of games or they lose a lot of games. The distribution of saves isn't uniform in the same way that the distribution of hits on a spray chart aren't uniform. Sometimes you have back-to-back-to-back games where you need to get a save. And you can't throw the same pitcher out there every single time. But what if a save was rather preventing a game from getting out of hand, or allowing your offense to take the lead? Those opportunities there are far more of. And when you look at percent likelihood to win a game based on the current situation, those moments are actually the ones where any change in the score has the greatest effect on the percent likelihood to win. If you're winning by 3 runs and it's the 9th inning, it's actually relatively hard to lose that game. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Of course it does. But it's pretty hard for that to happen. It's very easy to put your 5th best pitcher or 4th best pitcher in the bullpen out there in a game where there's only a 1-run difference and see that difference actually become a 3-run difference. That's far more likely to happen. So why don't we put the emphasis and the focus on preventing a game from becoming a loss rather than maintaining the win and closing it out as a win? I think there's a whole lot more value in doing that. Now, I think we've seen this sort of play out, maybe not as much as I'm suggesting, but when games are the most important, this sort of happens. If you look at the playoffs, particularly modern playoffs, bullpens are not utilized in nearly the same fashion that they are used during the regular season. Sometimes you see closers pitching 2+ innings. I've seen Mariano Rivera pitch over 2 innings in one game, which is very, very uncommon over his storied career. But when it's the playoffs, you've got to win. You've got to be efficient. You've got to be effective. And so organizations understand that the bullpen in October is different than the bullpen in June. But I don't know. With the game modernizing, I don't know if we really can say that a win in the final month of the season is any more valuable than a win in the first month of the season. I mean, it literally is not. When you look at the standings, they make no distinction of when the wins occurred. For certain teams that are trying to get into the playoffs, maybe they should adopt a more playoff-like vision for their bullpen. Maybe they should reimagine what their bullpen is, reimagine what their closer is, and maybe they should reinvent how they look at what a save is. I don't know if this will actually come to fruition. It's just food for thought, something I wanted to put there out in front of you and see if there is any ideas that maybe other people might have, or at the very least flush out the ideas myself. But I think there's something there. There's something to be said. There's something to be taken away from a discussion about how we view a bullpen. And I'm excited to see how it unfolds. I'm excited to see how the bullpen actually changes with a lot of the new rules, and I think there are more new rules to come in the future. I think the game is not done developing, and I'm sure I'll do another episode of this podcast discussing those sort of things. But I'll leave it there. The modern game is prioritizing efficiency and effectiveness, and I think it's on the shores of the bullpen. Soon the bullpen is going to become the focus, and I think every game, regardless of the month in the regular season, will soon be treated similarly to how we view the playoffs. Well, I thank you for listening to today's podcast. Today was August 18th, 2021. It was the first episode of Fan Interference, a Major League Baseball podcast where we discuss the latest news and storylines from around the league. My name is Joey. You can find me on Twitter at Major League Joey, and perhaps soon there might be some YouTube content coming out under the same name. I thank you so much, and until next time.